"You're not even her real granddaughter," my father hissed, standing beneath the oil painting of my grandmother. The words cracked through the still air like a slap. I had braced myself for tension after the funeral, for cold silence or cutting remarks, but not this. Not a full, unmasked rejection from the man I'd spent 27 years trying to please. The portrait above him, Grandmother Vivian's proud, painted gaze, seemed to witness it all in judgmental silence, her face stilled in oils while mine flushed with heat. My throat clenched. He was staring at me as if I were a stain on the rug, a flaw in the grand Whitmore lineage he so carefully curated. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then the words came, brittle and uneven. "What are you talking about?" His lips curled. "Don't pretend you didn't know. Your mother's little secret wasn't well kept." My heart pounded against my ribs. The scent of old books and polished mahogany clung to the study's air. I could almost hear Grandmother's voice echoing between the shelves. Stories of ancestors, of traditions and legacy. Now, every one of those stories fractured like glass in my memory. Victor took a step forward, his gaze shifting to the grand fireplace where that damned portrait loomed. "Vivian was obsessed with bloodlines. Once the lawyer confirms what I already know, you'll be out. No inheritance, no claim, nothing." I hated that I still needed his approval, that even now I wanted to scream, "You're wrong, you're lying," but I couldn't, not yet. "Do you promise?" I asked, somehow steady. "That only blood relatives deserve the inheritance?" He gave a sharp nod, chin tilted with the same imperious angle he'd always worn, at family dinners, charity galas, boardroom photos. "Absolutely. The legacy belongs to real Whitmores, not imposters." There it was, the challenge, the declaration. And though I didn't yet understand what he knew, or thought he knew, I understood one thing: he was laying a trap, or maybe springing one already set. I walked across the room slowly, letting my fingers trail along the edge of Grandmother's writing desk. I had sat here just weeks ago while she recounted our family's history, sipping tea as her bony fingers turned pages in faded photo albums. She had been so sharp, so deliberate in how she passed down names, dates, bloodlines. Why would she include me in all of that if I didn't belong? I turned back toward him, my voice colder now. "Grandmother mentioned me specifically when she talked about the estate." He scoffed. "Sentiment. She always had a blind spot for you. But the law doesn't care about feelings." He was already turning away, hands in his pockets as if the matter were closed, as if I were dismissed. "You can attend the will reading if you want," he tossed over his shoulder. "Next Friday, but it won't change a thing." My body didn't move, but inside, something did. A small, stubborn thread pulled taut. Not anger, not yet. Something older, something deeper. A need to understand. A need to uncover what had just shifted beneath my feet. The door clicked shut behind him. I sank into Grandmother's chair, surrounded by her leather-bound history, her decades of careful planning, and now, this. The quiet buzz of my phone pulled me back. One new message from my mother. "We need to talk. Alone. Tonight." My fingers trembled around the phone. The screen blurred slightly before I blinked the tears away. My father wasn't my father. Or at least, maybe he never had been. The truth pressed against my ribs like a scream that had nowhere to go. And yet I could feel something else behind the panic. Something whispering through the edges of my shock. If this is true, there's more he's hiding. I rose from the chair slowly, touched the corner of the desk one last time, and looked up at Vivian's painted eyes. She had always told me to trust my instincts. I walked toward the study doors with only one thought anchoring me. I left the study with one thing echoing in my head. What if he was right? "You were never supposed to find out like this," my mother whispered, stirring cream into her untouched coffee. I watched the swirl of white dissolve into dark brown as if it could somehow smooth over the cracks just made in my identity. The cafe was nearly empty, the jazz from an old speaker skipping ever so slightly like it too had something to hide. Rain dotted the fogged windows behind her, drawing crooked paths down the glass. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the spoon aside, the clink of silverware too loud in the quiet. I had imagined this moment many times as a child, usually during one of Victor's colder silences or when I felt the burn of being othered in my own family. I had invented 1,000 excuses for why I never quite fit. None of them were this. "I need you to tell me the truth," I said, surprised by the calmness in my voice. Elaine looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something fracture behind her carefully composed expression. Regret. Not the shallow kind that comes with inconvenience. This was the kind that had been fermenting for years, maybe decades. "I was 19 when I met Andrew," she began, voice brittle. "Your uncle? Your father?" The word caught, but she pushed through it. "He was brilliant, restless, nothing like Victor." I blinked. Somehow, hearing his name said so plainly like that, "Your father," made everything more real. My fingers tightened around the warm mug in front of me, grounding myself. "We fell in love fast," she continued, "too fast. Then he got a research grant in Seattle. We told ourselves we could handle the distance, but the calls got shorter. The silences longer. I was lonely. Victor, he was there. Persistent." I didn't want to hear the next part, but I let her speak. "There was one night," she said quietly. "Just one. I thought I could move on, build something steady. I married Victor because he promised safety. He needed a wife for his standing. I needed security for my baby." My throat tightened. "And you were sure? That I was Andrew's?" "The timing, Claire. It all pointed to him. But Victor refused to accept that. He claimed you, made it a condition of our life together, and I went along." "Why?" I asked, not accusing, just aching. She swallowed hard. "Because I thought it was better for you. A clean identity, a stable family, and I was scared. Scared of what Andrew might do if he found out. Scared of what Victor would take from me if I told the truth." She paused and looked at me. "He always wanted control. Over everything." The jazz faded into another track, a slower one this time. Her fingers traced the rim of the cup like a nervous tick. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. I could tell she didn't expect it. But she was offering the one thing I'd been starved of for years: honesty. "I need to know for sure," I said. "Andrew deserves to know too." Elaine nodded slowly. "I understand." My mind flashed back to Sunday afternoons in Grandmother Vivian's study, tea, books, stories of strong women, and whispered family scandals, and those moments when she'd pause, stare at me just a little too long, as if weighing something unspoken. Her hand, cool and frail, on top of mine as she said, "A Whitmore makes her own legacy." Had she known? Of course she had. "Did you ever love Victor?" I asked suddenly, the question coming out sharper than I intended. Elaine flinched as if slapped. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. And then slowly, a single tear traced a path down her cheek. She shook her head. That was enough. I rose, placing a few bills on the table without looking at her. My chest felt tight, but lighter somehow. The air outside hit my face like a wake-up slap as I pushed the cafe door open. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't. I didn't know what Andrew would say, or what Victor would do once he learned I knew. But none of that mattered. Not yet. I walked out of that cafe knowing one thing. I'd been living someone else's story. "If you think Victor's lies stop with you," Andrew said, "then you don't know my brother." The apartment smelled faintly of cedar and old paper, like knowledge aged in silence. It suited him. Books lined the shelves in disordered stacks, journals filled with notes spilled across the dining table, and family photos, some familiar, some faded, watched from their frames. A soft amber glow lit the space, flickering off polished surfaces and casting long shadows behind us. I had always remembered Andrew as the warm uncle who gave me thoughtful gifts and asked questions no one else did. But now, sitting across from him as a grown woman confronting the ruins of her identity, I saw the creases of time and restraint around his eyes. He offered me tea. I declined. "You look just like her," he said. "Vivian." I wasn't sure if it was meant as comfort or confirmation, maybe both. "I need to know for sure," I said. "If I'm your daughter, if everything they've told me was a lie." He nodded slowly, setting down the tea tray untouched. We'll do the test today. I have a doctor friend with a private lab. No delays, no tampering. That last part didn't feel like paranoia. It felt like wisdom. We swabbed our cheeks in silence. The assistant took the samples with a gloved hand and promised results within 72 hours. As she left, Andrew closed the door with deliberate care and turned to me, his expression unreadable. I never knew, he said. Not really. There were moments. Vivian would mention you with a softness she never had for the others. And when I saw you at the funeral, your eyes... He didn't finish the sentence, but I felt its weight in the quiet. I spent so long trying to be what Victor wanted, I said, and I never measured up. Maybe I wasn't supposed to. Andrew looked away. His hands flexed at his sides, restless. There's something else. Something I never told anyone. Not even Vivian. I straightened. What is it? He hesitated, then retrieved an old notebook from the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet. Inside was a folded envelope, yellowed at the edges, addressed in handwriting I recognized, my grandfather's. I found this after my father died. It's not a legal document, but it's a letter. One he never sent. He handed it to me. The ink had faded, but the message was clear. A confession about an adoption. After years of miscarriages, my grandparents had adopted a boy, Victor. The letter spoke of secrecy, of shame turned into pride, of hoping to protect him from ever feeling less than. I stared at the page, heartbeat drumming in my ears. You think Victor's not really a Whitmore? I whispered. Andrew nodded. I'm not sure, but if the trust depends on bloodline, then he has the most to lose, I finished, voice low. The thought was chilling. Victor had built his empire, his ego, on legacy, on being Vivian's rightful heir. If that foundation cracked, everything he stood on would collapse, and if he suspected the truth, maybe that's why he had tried so hard to cut me out. Maybe it wasn't about removing a threat, it was about hiding one. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, a message from Simon. Claire, you need to talk to me. It's about the lab. I stared at it for a long moment, dread and curiosity twisting together. Simon's a friend, I said aloud. A journalist. He helped me once. He's been investigating private labs tied to inheritance cases. Andrew raised an eyebrow. Think we're not the first to suspect tampering? Or to be targeted? We didn't speak for a while after that. I drifted around the apartment, looking at the photos again. One of them showed a young Andrew and Victor, standing on a pier. Victor's smile was forced, sharp. Andrew's hand hovered behind his back, not quite touching his brother's shoulder. Even then, the distance had been visible. The sky outside turned the windows to mirrors. I saw myself reflected, older than I felt, younger than I should be, for carrying this much weight. There was no going back to before. No reclaiming the innocence of believing Victor was simply cruel because he didn't understand me. Now I knew better. The DNA results would arrive in 72 hours, but I already knew the truth would destroy someone. Victor knows, Simon said over the phone, and he's not waiting for the will reading. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I pulled into the garage beneath the Midtown law office. The sound of his voice still rang in my ears, tense and fast, as if he was speaking through clenched teeth. He's already moving, Simon had warned. He's got Reese meeting you today, right? Whatever they offer, it's a trap. The building's lobby was glass and chrome, sterile in that aggressively modern way that screams both power and indifference. The elevator chimed softly as I stepped out onto the 15th floor. A secretary with an icy smile led me into a room that looked more like a luxury lounge than a place for legal maneuvering. Leather chairs, polished wood, bottled water chilled to perfection. And Mr. Reese, waiting like a snake in a tailored suit. Claire, he greeted me with a warmth that didn't touch his eyes. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I sat across from him, keeping my bag close, the DNA results burning a metaphorical hole inside it. I hadn't told Andrew yet, not officially. I hadn't told anyone but Simon, but it was real. I was Andrew's daughter, legally, biologically, and by the terms of the Whitmore Trust, by Victor's own twisted standards, I had more right to the legacy than he ever did. Reese slid a thin folder across the glass desk, Victor wanted to avoid unnecessary complications. We understand this situation is emotionally complex. I didn't open the folder. What is it? A severance of sorts, a one-time payout, $250,000, tax-free, in exchange for relinquishing any claim to the estate. I laughed, sharp, humorless. You think this is a negotiation? I think, he said, still smiling, that Victor is being generous. Very few people get the chance to walk away from this kind of family dispute with dignity, and $250,000. You mean silence. He tilted his head, as if acknowledging my perception without affirming it. Let's just say everyone benefits if this doesn't escalate. My phone vibrated in my lap. A message from Simon. Got it. LabCorp Trust linked to Victor's holding company. 2 employees flagged for tampering with DNA results in probate cases. Want the file? My heart skipped. I didn't look up. Instead, I placed the unopened folder back on the desk and folded my hands. You know what's funny, Mr. Reese, I said quietly. Victor has always insisted only blood relatives deserve the Whitmore fortune. Reese's smile faltered. I leaned in. You said only blood inherits. Let's see how that holds up, for everyone. The air changed. Just slightly. Enough for me to know I'd touched something raw. Reese gathered the folder slowly, tucking it back into his briefcase like a threat sheathed for now. Victor won't take kindly to this. I stood. He's had an entire lifetime of taking. I think he'll survive a little pushback. As I turned to leave, Reese called after me, his voice like ice slicing through silk. Claire, he's not just going to let you walk away from this. I didn't look back. I'm not the one who needs to walk away. Outside, the wind had picked up, rustling the golden leaves on the trees lining the street. The chill didn't bother me. My fingers were already tingling with the adrenaline of truth and impending war. Another message buzzed. Simon, sending you the files now. Also, you should talk to Clara Weston. She was Vivian's nurse. She knows something. Clara Weston. The name sparked something. A flicker of a memory. A quiet woman who always lingered near the edges of family events. Unnoticed, unquestioned. Until now. The pieces were aligning. Slowly, surely. Victor thought he was silencing me, but he was only giving me more to work with. I left that office not with money, but with ammunition, and 72 hours to aim it right. You look like your grandmother, the old nurse smiled. Victor never did. The words were gentle, almost fond, but they sliced clean through the fog clinging to that October morning like a scalpel. I studied Clara Weston's face across the small table in the sunroom of Westmore Care Home. Her eyes were pale blue, clouded but sharp, and the hand that held her teacup barely trembled. She looked like someone who had held too many truths for too long. She always loved you, she said. From the moment you were born, said you were her second chance. I leaned forward. Clara, I need you to be honest with me, about everything. Clara placed her cup down with deliberate care, folding her hands over her lap. I was there through it all, she said softly. The miscarriages, 3 of them, the quiet grief, and then Victor. She looked past me, through the fogged window. Her voice carried the weight of someone unpacking history, not gossip. They adopted him in '83, quietly. Your grandfather had connections. No press, no record outside what was sealed. They raised him like their own. But Vivian, she never forgot. My breath hitched. Why didn't she tell anyone? She was trying to protect him, Clara replied. Back then, legacy mattered. Bloodlines, appearances. She thought if they loved him enough, he'd never feel different. But he did, I whispered. Clara gave a sad nod. He always knew. He just turned that knowledge into entitlement. From her sweater pocket, she withdrew a folded envelope, yellowed and delicate with time. She gave me this years ago, said I should pass it on if things got ugly after she passed. I opened the letter carefully. Vivian's handwriting danced across the page in familiar loops. If this letter reaches you, it means the truth has become necessary. Victor was not born of my body, but I raised him as my own. Still, I know blood and I know legacy. Claire is Andrew's child. She is my blood. My fingers trembled. The signature was bold, unmistakable. And this? Clara reached beneath her chair cushion, producing a crinkled photocopy of an official adoption certificate. I kept a copy, just in case. I took a shaky breath. The pieces were lining up. At last, Andrew sat silently beside me, the color drained from his face. He had arrived midway through the conversation, listening without interrupting. Now he placed a hand gently on my shoulder. I had no idea, he murmured. All this time, I thought Victor was just cruel, not threatened. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Simon, lab data match. Your sample was swapped. Confirmed. I'm sending the full report. I exhaled slowly. My hands moved on instinct, compiling the files. Vivian's letter, the adoption certificate, Simon's report, and the verified DNA results into a single encrypted folder. I need to send this to Whitmore's real lawyer, I said, the one Victor couldn't buy. Andrew nodded. You sure he's well enough? He's recovering, I said, but if he's anything like Vivian, he'll show up just in time. By evening, the files were uploaded, sent, and acknowledged with a curt, formal reply. Received, reviewed, be ready. I sat back on the worn leather couch in Andrew's apartment, staring at the ceiling as the weight of the day pressed down on me. For the first time, I wasn't chasing shadows. I was preparing to bring them into the light. I thought of Victor, still smug, still sure he had won. I thought of Vivian's voice in my head. Some secrets age like wine, others rot. Tomorrow, they would rot in public. Be ready, he told me. We're bringing everything to the table tomorrow. There are bloodline requirements in the Whitmore Trust, Mr. Reese announced, which disqualifies Claire. The words dropped like a gavel on polished mahogany, slicing through the morning stillness of the Whitmore Estate's grand hall. Heads turned toward me, some curious, others already smug. Victor didn't even try to hide his grin. He sat at the head of the table, flanked by cousins and allies like a self-appointed king presiding over a coronation. My heart didn't race. Not anymore. I had walked into this room with the weight of truth and a war chest of evidence. Let him gloat. Reese continued, flipping pages with practiced elegance. Based on recent DNA results submitted by Mr. Whitmore, Claire's paternity is in question, and as the trust mandates direct blood descent, That test was unauthorized, I cut in. My voice was calm, almost soft, but it carried. Collected from a water glass without my consent, tampered with by a lab Victor controls. A murmur rippled through the room. Victor's jaw flexed. Are you seriously challenging the test? Desperate isn't a good look on you, Claire. I'm not challenging it, I said. I'm replacing it. I opened my folder and slid it across the table toward Mr. Whitmore, the estate's true counsel, freshly recovered from illness and unimpressed by Reese's theatrics. Inside were copies of the independent lab results confirming Andrew as my biological father. Verified chain of custody, multiple samples, all sealed. But I wasn't done. I pulled out the next piece. A photocopy of an adoption certificate dated 1983. Then a letter, signed in Vivian Whitmore's hand, stating clearly and without apology that Victor was not her biological son. Victor, I said, my voice steady, you once told me only blood deserves the fortune. So I have to ask, if that's still your belief, where does that leave you? The silence that followed was absolute. Andrew stood beside me. She is the only Whitmore by blood, the only one who actually carries our mother's legacy. Victor lurched to his feet. This is a lie. Fabricated. She's manipulating all of you. Mr. Whitmore raised a hand. The documents have been authenticated, and per Vivian's instructions. He reached for a sealed envelope and cracked the wax. I was instructed to read this aloud only if lineage became a point of dispute. He cleared his throat. To my family. If you are hearing this, it means the past has caught up to us. I have loved you all in my own way, but truth is not negotiable. Victor, you were brought to us when hope had dimmed, and we raised you with everything we had. But you were not born of my blood. Claire is Andrew's daughter. She is my legacy, by name, by love, and by lineage. The trust, by its terms, must follow the bloodline. My estate, however, I have distributed as I see fit." Mr. Whitmore looked up. "All Whitmore Trust Holdings shall pass to Claire Whitmore, biological granddaughter of Vivian." Victor's face blanched. "You can't do this." "It's already done," Mr. Whitmore replied, folding the letter neatly. Victor's fury was volcanic. He knocked over his chair, face red, hands clenched. "She manipulated you all. She doesn't deserve this." I rose slowly. "I didn't win everything, Victor. I just took back what was mine all along." The echoes of legacy and lies finally collided in the grand hall where power once silenced truth. Claire, once dismissed and deceived, stood calm among gasps and shattered illusions as the weight of generations shifted to her hands. Justice doesn't always arrive with trumpets or thunder. Sometimes it walks in quietly, carrying evidence. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. And in that silence, where Victor's voice could no longer dominate, truth finally took its rightful place.